context. And maybe we could debate the following levels. What do we mean by context? And is context in the lead? We can talk at length about functional classification. I happen to be a big fan of functional classification, just so you know. I just think that it's only one criterion of several that need to be considered. So if we can agree on the problem, and I think also agree that one of the strengths of the Ashto Green Book is its flexibility. There aren't that many great streets that couldn't be accommodated under the Green Book. The problem lies in the lack of guidance to the designer. So if you are a really good designer and willing to fight for your beliefs and have read the recent research, it's pretty much possible to do a great street design and one that accommodates the values of your local community under the Green Book. But if you're a mediocre designer, it's a lot harder. And many of the default dimensions or approaches are not necessarily the optimal ones from a safety or environmental or economic development perspective. And there's limited guidance in the document about when one should use, when there's a range, one end of the range versus the other end of the range. So we may also agree that the work that Gary Toth did back in 1998 for PennDOT and the New Jersey DOT is great work, but that was 14 years ago. And so my concern is if you're going after research dollars to think about this again, this stuff has been thought about for a long time. When are we going to be ready to actually recognize that the approach that is being taken in New Jersey and Pennsylvania is not a progressive approach, it's a conservative approach. The approach in Pennsylvania and New Jersey is spending less government funds on more productivity, turning more opportunities over to the private sector, fostering private innovation, fostering business and the economy of local jurisdictions, and fostering accommodation of the most space and cost-efficient modes of transportation rather than the least efficient modes of transportation. So what I don't understand really is the pace of change over at Ashto. You just recently released a new update to the Green Book and a new update to the bicycle facility design guidelines. And they sort of moved out of the 1950s into the 1970s, right? So there's progress that's been made, but it's so painfully slow. And so we wonder, again, what can we do to pick up the pace? Or, as other organizations have stepped into the gap of knowing that the research has been there for 20 years and these design approaches are failing us, like NACTO creating its own set of urban street design guidelines, and many municipalities and many DOTs creating their own design guidelines. And the ITE book, right, exactly, that Jim Desa led. Is Ashto at risk of becoming irrelevant because it's not keeping up with the research and understanding as quickly as other organizations are? And what can we do to help Ashto either increase the pace or delegate some of its authority, as many jurisdictions do? There's a list of design guidance and specific criteria about under which circumstances do you use which design document. Because I think most of us in the room will agree that there is no better researched or thoughtfully put together design manual for rural highways and for more auto-oriented urban contexts than what you guys have put together over the last 100 years here in the United States. I mean, it's every country in the world has fundamentally based its guidelines on yours. And where the challenge is the urban context. And that context is consuming too much time and resource in being able to design great streets, and it's frustrating everyone. So what's the path out of that? That's not going to take 14 years.
First, I got to tell you a story. Every now and then I get international visitors. The Japanese were the last that came in last Thursday. But the week before, I was asked to entertain the Public Works Minister from Afghanistan. And the Public Works Minister from Afghanistan is One of his agencies that he's over is their National Highway Agency. And what has happened in Afghanistan since we've been helping them with this 10-year war is the Russians came in and built highways in the previous occupation. And then during the course of the Allied activity there, the French would build a highway in this section, the British a highway in this section, and he has a whole array of highways that have been built over the last 10 years to their national standards, but not to any common standard. So he was after me to say, can we work with you to adopt national standards for Afghanistan? So first we'll take Afghanistan, then we'll take the cities of America. That's the thing.
They had explosive growth of infrastructure.
There you go. Well, let me tell you truly, what has been going on at the AASHTO level and nationally in the field of design, and then see if we can goose it a little. I don't have any problem with your impatience. We do need to get some additional momentum going. Up until Jackie and her crew insisted on injecting alien thoughts into the design process for highways in America, only in 1995, in federal law, were our state engineers allowed to factor in community concerns. Up until then, the only allowable design criteria were geometrics and safety. We wanted to move traffic efficiently, that means as fast as possible, and as safely as possible. Those were the only criteria our people were allowed to craft our designs to meet. And it was only with the National Highway System designation of 95 that the door was open, consider community character, historic concerns, tree canopy, any and all of the things that neighborhoods value and urban commerce values. Those were alien concepts until 95. Maryland DOT hosted a national conference, 38 states participated in 98, and they had a great 3-day dialogue, and coming out of that was a commitment at the state level, let's pioneer this stuff. 5 states agreed to be lead states and do context-sensitive solutions. So from 98, I would say until about 2005, we had tremendous momentum. Tom Warren from Utah, who was our president in 2000, was a national leader and continues to be within the Americans ASCE. What is that? Civil Engineers Group. But Tom continues to be a national leader in that group. Jim Codell from Kentucky. You wouldn't expect Kentucky to be a national leader. His state had volunteered to be a national leader, and he did some dynamite things in Kentucky. And so there was momentum, and I went to conferences, I think in about 15 states around the country. They held conferences, educational sessions to advance this concept. The resistance from our members came over, you're going to force us designers to sacrifice safety, and we aren't going to kill people just to have greener roads. And so we had to satisfy those who were concerned about this jeopardizing safety as we opened the door to other considerations. So we did an addendum to the Green Book that addressed that. The other's concern was you're going to subject us to liability, because if people do have crashes because of our second-rate design that you're forcing us to look at, that's going to be a problem. So we did a series of 4 addendums to the Green Book that problem solved and said none of these are real problems. If you look at the community concerns and accommodate the community concerns, but what happened about, I would say, 06, is we began to see what I figured. We'd been working on this internal dashboard for about 8 years, and I figured it was time to move from an ad hoc way of overseeing and advancing this concept to mainstream it. And when we tried to mainstream it, there was pushback, and it's been stymied for the near future. Now let me mention 2 things that I think open the door for a new dialogue. We have been working together on a strategic highway research program for the last 5 years that is beginning to produce results. And one of the components, there's a component on reliability, renewal, capacity, and safety. But one of the components is capacity. And the reason it was front and center in the research process, we are stymied in many communities from getting projects approved. Well, the smart DOTs are saying, well, duh, we aren't listening to people. We have to accommodate their concerns, build them into the design, and then we'll get the green light to move forward. The more less progressive state DOTs try to plow ahead, and they're beating their head against a brick wall when they do that, and they fail to get project approval and they're stymied. So the impetus behind this, we put, I would say, 30 million in research into this one subject is, and has come up with a solution, let's enhance consultation with community groups to be more accommodating to what they're after, and then adjust our design accordingly. So over the next 5 years, we're going to attempt to implement the results of that research. And what I mentioned to John the other day, we're going to look for institutional allies to help us figure out how to do that at the state-by-state, community-by-community level. And so I think this will be a funded initiative. This coming, starting today, we're balloting this matter amongst the states. If it passes, we'll get probably another 50 million to put toward implementation of these ideas. If it fails, we'll have less, but we'll still have